And now the Vatican is at it again, excommunicating the resistance to the revolution. That's why this is so important. It has nothing to do with your preferences, your liturgical preferences, or mine. It has to do with resistance to the spirit of Vatican II, which is as revolutionary as the day is long. It's the great reset, if you will, of the Catholic Church. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Michael Matt. This is the Remnant Underground. A little later in the show now, the plot thickens. The Society of St. Pius X appeals the excommunications. So what happens now? Also, good news, Cardinal Burke has had quite enough of the homo-synodal way.
We have to insist that this whole synodality business stop, and there be a very serious study done of the whole matter, because we're talking about the very life of the church, and we're talking about the salvation of souls. Now certain even bishops, archbishops are saying, encouraging the LGBTQ plus agenda, saying, look, the church is changing its teaching, be of good courage, go forward. What's at stake here is the truth itself.
It's hard to believe we're even having to talk about this, isn't it? What in the world has happened to the Catholic Church? Going to get into that more a little bit in a bit later in the show, Cardinal Burke, in a moment. But first, this is pretty much the last chance now, if you want to sponsor me, to climb to the rooftop of Africa. Kind of apprehensive about this, not getting any younger, but we will be climbing Kilimanjaro, all 20,000 feet of it, to raise funds for the minor seminary in Singida. Now, you'll remember I interviewed the superior of the Holy Cross there in Puma, Father Antonius, after the short pilgrimage this year. And you know what, friends, this really is, it's the real deal. I mean, I would not be climbing Kilimanjaro if it weren't the real deal, 20,000 feet up. It takes 7 days to get up there. We're going to have the Latin Mass, 2 Latin Mass priests going up with us, 40 porters, Latin Mass every single day, 2 Latin Masses every day. And it's all for the purpose of supporting the traditional Catholic mission there in Tanzania. For me, this African connection has become absolutely crucial to the Unite the Clans initiative. It's so exciting. It's so good. It's so real. So hit the link below if you want to sponsor us on that. And let's just do this. Let's build the Catholic future, traditional Catholic future in Africa and all throughout the world, because they're going to be pumping young traditional Catholic priests all over the continent, all over the world very soon. Bishop Schneider is a major benefactor and sort of a godfather of the Holy Cross mission in Tanzania. So he did the ordinations for them last year when we were there, and he'll be doing it again this summer. I don't know where he gets the energy, but he's all over the place and he's promoting tradition everywhere. Really exciting stuff coming up. And speaking of Bishop Schneider, he very prominently partners with tonight's sponsor of the Underground, Sanctifica. Congratulations to Sanctifica. Even after the consecrations, after the excommunications of the SSPX, Sanctifica has not dropped the SSPX traditional Latin Masses from their Latin Mass locator on their website. So that alone is worth the price of admission, and it's another reason I'm very proud to endorse and partner with Sanctifica, which, as I always say, makes everyone, including this guy, a better Catholic. I think, again, one of the best things is the daily updates on what feast day it is, what saint day it is, but also praying the rosary with Bishop Schneider on a daily basis is really a beautiful thing. So check out Sanctifica and become, quite frankly, a better Catholic. It's free, and it's at the App Store and at Google Play. Okay, a lot to get to tonight. I really want to start off with a quick word of thanks to all you guys for sticking with me on this big controversy now, the current thing with the Society of St. Pius X, consecrations, and of course the resulting excommunications from the Vatican. And right now we got to hang on against a Vatican that's really turning out to be pretty rigorous and pretty Neo-Pelagian in its own right, pretty Pharisaical, I must say. In fact, I wonder lately, has Cardinal Vicky Fernandez, has he even read the Code of Canon Law? Has he read, for example, Canon 383, which outlines a bishop's obligation to care for his sheep in times like this? Section 3 of that canon reads that the bishop is required to treat those not in full communion with the Catholic Church with charity and humanity and to actively foster ecumenism. Now, they're the ones that are saying the Society of St. Pius X is not in full communion. So it's an obligation for them then to follow the Code of Canon Law, isn't it? They seem positively eager in the Vatican to run the SSPX out, to not give them a hearing, right? This is not synodal. This is not a listening church. This is not a pastoral approach. They couldn't wait to run them out of the church, or say that they had disqualified themselves, excommunicated themselves, even though the society had consistently tried to approach them. When the Holy Year happened, they made a wonderful show of support for that. I don't know how many hundreds of their priests went to Rome for the Holy Year last year, remember? Right? So they were really trying to show the Holy Father, we are not eager to resist you. We're certainly not schismatics. And yet the moment they did what they had to do, which was based on Traditionis Custodes, which is based on the fact that the Vatican was showing no signs whatsoever of accommodating traditional Catholics. In fact, they were canceling the traditional Latin Mass worldwide. So the Vatican, as a means of, or the Society of St. Pius X, as a means of survival, says, okay, fine, then we have to do this. We have to proceed. While the Vatican actually refuses to listen to faithful Catholics.
So we're going to offer, the church said we should be able to offer the Mass for you much more widely. Now that would mean exactly returning to the provisions of Summorum Pontificum and casting aside, undoing Traditionis Custodes, because that basically tried to undo almost everything that was contained in Pope Benedict's provisions. So I think Pope Leo would be very well advised, put Traditionis Custodes in the shredder, let's have the Latin Mass available freely. And by the way, most world's bishops will not object, because as we know from the survey that Pope Francis authorized, most of them didn't object to what Pope Benedict did.
Yeah, exactly, Father Murray. And Father Murray knows because he was there in 1988. What's actually going on here? Cardinal Burke was making the same point. Give them back the Mass that they really, really wanted and they've been accustomed to attending for a long time.
One of the marks of the traditional Latin Mass community is that there are many children, and the parents are very concerned to hand on to their children the Catholic faith. We need a dicastery for those Catholics who desire to worship according to the extraordinary form, and that they be able to receive all the sacraments according to the use which was prior to the reforms.
Well, here's the thing, friends. Father Gerald Murray, Cardinal Burke, I think surely they know the truth here, what's really going on. And what's really going on helps us all to understand the crisis that we now face. That the only reason the Vatican would be disposed to restore the Latin Mass once again would be to pull support away from the Society of St. Pius X, as Father Murray readily admits.
How do we help people who have been attending the St. Pius X Society Masses precisely because they like to attend the traditional Latin Mass, but now they don't want to associate with the schism? So the church is saying, we don't want you associating with the schism. We don't want you to become schismatics yourselves.
Now, if you want, you can say, well, I disagree with the Society of St. Pius X, but I do admit that's what the Vatican is doing. The Vatican is trying to undermine the Society of St. Pius. That's fine. You don't have to say it's a good thing. But you can't deny that were it not for the Society of St. Pius X, were it not for Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, you would not have access to your Latin Mass. And this is where we get down to the whole idea of natural justice. We cannot pretend like the society doesn't matter to all of us, whether you're in the society or not. You can't pretend like it doesn't matter. You can't pretend like the great sacrifice that Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre made, pretty much sacrificed himself, right? For the movement, for the cause, for doctrine, for the liturgy, for all of us. Like somehow it didn't matter. You know it did. And Archbishop Lefebvre, and here's where it's so important for us to understand why. What's really going on here? Archbishop Lefebvre did not sacrifice himself for our liturgical preferences because we're a bunch of Latin buffs, right? Liturgy snobs. Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre resisted the revolution of Vatican II, the revolution, the doctrinal revolution of Vatican II, the spirit of Vatican II, not just the new Mass of Vatican II. And you'll recall from last year when we talked about this down here in the underground, that for him, that spirit really manifested itself in 1986 at the Assisi prayer meeting. That was for him, that was for Archbishop Lefebvre, the last straw. So after that, when Archbishop Lefebvre broke and disobeyed the Vatican, consecrated 4 bishops, this was the reason then, that was the shot heard round the world, and that's the reason that the Vatican restored the Latin Mass with permission via indult on a very restricted basis to undermine, friends, this is just the reality, to undermine their most organized resistance, the most organized traditional Catholic resistance in the world today, then and now, by providing a space, as Pope John Paul said, a space for legitimate aspirations of those attached to the Latin Mass, right? He put that in the Motu Proprio Ecclesia Dei in 1988. He said that Catholics could have the Latin Mass so long as they distanced themselves from the Society of St. Pius X. That was the reason for it. Now, many people, many lay people, many good priests, many good bishops took advantage of that allowance without doing as Abidanan said, without swallowing the council. They simply took advantage of the Mass at the parish level because all of a sudden there was traditional Latin Masses in every major city in the world, and it backfired, right? So then Pope Benedict XVI comes along in 2007, Summorum Pontificum, and he basically doubles down on the reason and the purpose for the Ecclesia Dei Motu Proprio of Pope John Paul II. He bases Summorum Pontificum on the Motu Proprio Ecclesia Dei by name. He specifically says that. In fact, in his accompanying letter that Pope Benedict released at the same time, he spells it right out for everybody, you know. He says that Pope John Paul's Motu Proprio Ecclesia Dei, July 2nd, 1988, was, and I'm quoting now, was primarily to assist the Society of St. Pius X to recover full unity with the successor of St. Peter. You don't have to say it was malicious, but you have to say, obviously, that was what it was all about. And it's important to understand that, because that's the reason we have access to the Latin Mass today. That's why the traditional Catholic counter-revolution continues to move forward. What just happened July 1st of this summer, this year, obviously is continuing on in that spirit. Okay, we will resist then, right? And now the traditional Latin Mass is being at least partially restored again. So you can see how it's all working, you know? But again, Pope Benedict was very clear about it being in relation to Archbishop Lefebvre and the Society of St. Pius X. He writes in his accompanying letter to Summorum Pontificum in 2007, unfortunately, this reconciliation between the Society and the Chair of St. Peter has not yet come about. Thus, says Benedict, the need for clearer juridical regulation, which had not been foreseen at the time of 1988, Motu Proprio. This is necessary, he said, to regain reconciliation and unity with the Society of St. Pius X. Do you see what I'm getting at? You cannot break that connection. You cannot pretend like this wasn't all about the Society of St. Pius X, because that's exactly what it was all about. And then this is where it gets interesting. Pope Benedict XVI, who we've always said, was not a traditionalist. He was a Peritus at Vatican II. He was a modernist. I think he had the faith, but he was definitely a modernist. He was one of them. And so in the Summorum Pontificum accompanying letter, he invites the bishops of the world to what? To send to the Holy See, okay, I'm quoting, an account of your experiences with the Latin Mass 3 years after this Motu Proprio has taken effect. And he says, if truly serious difficulties come to light, ways to remedy those difficulties can be sought. Do you see what I'm getting at? Summorum Pontificum was not necessarily a permanent solution. In fact, my opinion is that Pope Benedict XVI really wanted to have a mutual enrichment. He was embarrassed of the banal, on-the-spot product, as he called it, the new Mass in Monsignor Gamber's book. He called the new Mass a banal, on-the-spot product. It was not what we intended at Vatican II, liturgically. So I think the Pope did want to have the traditional Mass enrich the new Mass as well, but he wasn't trying to restore the traditional Latin Mass 100%. He wasn't trying to hand total victory to the traditionalists. He was trying to work out a compromise, right? By saying to the bishop, hey, if this doesn't work out, 3 years from now, we'll reevaluate, okay? 3 years from now. This is 2007. And this is why Pope Francis then, now follow me on this, this is why Pope Francis, in his Motu Proprio, Traditionis Custodes, which cancels the Latin Mass, this is why he felt free to cancel the Latin Mass, in line with the initiative of my venerable predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, to invite the bishops of the world to assess the application of the motu proprio Summorum Pontificum 3 years after its publication. Francis says, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, so he's saying, my Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith now, carried out a detailed consultation of the bishops of the world in 2020. He's saying, in answer to what Pope Benedict wanted, like, let's reevaluate, let's see if it's working. And if it's not, we're going to remedy. Francis said the remedy is cancel it, because we're running a revolution over here, right? Francis, in a way, is a very honest modernist, isn't he? So in her interview then with Cardinal Burke, Diane Montagna, Vatican journalist Diane Montagna, she reminds the Cardinal that the results of that consultation that Francis is talking about in his accompanying letter were in fact based on deception, on something that never happened. And so Diane Montagna asked Cardinal Burke the question. A year ago, it was revealed that a Vatican survey of bishops contradicted the stated rationale for Traditionis Custodes, as it showed that most bishops, in fact, supported Summorum Pontificum. What are your views on this? And Cardinal Burke answers the question.
There has to be a response to that. I mean, it's a motu proprio. And one pope makes a motu proprio, another one modifies it. I mean, Traditionis Custodes modified radically Summorum Pontificum, the motu proprio of Benedict XVI. So the Holy Father, now viewing the whole situation, is in a position to issue his own motu proprio. And so, yes, we can't continue on like this. It's imposing a suffering on the faithful which is completely unnecessary.
Now, this is very interesting, because what it shows, people say, you bought into the indult, man, and, you completely swallowed. No, what it shows actually is God's providence, okay? What Diane Montagna is talking about is the fact that many bishops in the world actually, wherever the reasons for Summorum Pontificum were initially, vis-a-vis Archbishop Lefebvre, the consecration, the excommunications, whatever those reasons were for bringing the Latin Mass back, it backfired even at the level of the episcopacy, where many bishops, according to Diane Montagna, who's a first-rate Vatican journalist, many bishops had no problem with it. They said, yeah, this is kind of neat. I like it. We have no problem with Summorum Pontificum. We have no problem with the Latin Mass in our diocese. But Francis came out and claimed that the bishops did have a problem with it. Just simply wasn't true. There may have been one or two who did, but the majority of them did not. And Cardinal Burke now, and he obviously acknowledges that as well. So, but it didn't matter, because in the accompanying letter for Traditionis Custodes, Pope Francis, he went with the lie anyway. And what does he say? He says, I am saddened, I'm quoting, I am saddened that the instrumental use of the Missale Romanum of 1962, that's the Latin Mass, is often characterized by a rejection, not only of the liturgical reform, but of the Second Vatican Council itself, claiming with unfounded and unsustainable assertions that Vatican II betrayed the tradition and the true church, says Francis. Now, this is not exactly what the bishops, in fact, said, as I just explained, but nevertheless, Francis is essentially acting in accord with the spirit of Vatican II, isn't he? That's why I say he's basically being honest with what the real agenda was. Because he doesn't care about the Society of St. Pius. He's not worried about the traditionalists. He's worried about the revolution, right? So he's essentially acting in accord with his post-conciliar papal predecessors, who in fact scrapped, from Paul VI moving forward, scrapped the Missale Romanum, the old Latin Mass, the old missal, right, of history and tradition. Because why? Because that missal, that Mass, is truly at odds with Vatican II. Pope Francis was right. And so it's up to us, no matter where we go to Mass, right? It's up to us to make sure it backfires. It's up to the bishops, the good bishops who are out there, to make sure this backfires. Bring the Latin Mass back for starters, right? It's up to every one of us to make sure we're not just looking to have our little Latin Mass, and then we're going to peacefully coexist with all the other problems in the church, including Jimmy, what's his name? You know who I'm talking about.
Martin.
Father Jimmy Martin, right? This is exactly what happened with Pope John Paul's Ecclesia Dei, with Pope Benedict's Summorum Pontificum, and now it's happening once again with the Society of St. Pius X appealing the Vatican's decree of automatic excommunication. I would encourage you to go over to the remnantnewspaper.com right now and read Robert Morrison's article on this, because he points out that in and of itself, this appeal to lift the excommunication makes it clear that the Society of St. Pius X is in fact not schismatic, since obviously real schismatics are perfectly comfortable telling the Pope to go to hell, right? So as it is, as it's happening right now with this appeal against to have this excommunication lifted, the Society of Pius X are obviously not schismatic. They are fighting this all the way. No, the Synodal Vatican has broken with 2,000 years of Catholic tradition. Not us! That's what they're saying. We've broken with nothing. And by the way, while they wait for the Vatican's reply to their appeal to lift the excommunication, guess what? The sentence of excommunication is suspended. Well played, Father Pagliariani. Well played. Despite all this decades, century or more of modernist revolution, remember Pope St. Pius X warned us about this modernist infiltration of the church way back at the turn of the last century, right? Despite it all the time, all the water under the bridge, there is at this moment still left a massive global resistance, Catholic resistance, which every one of us has the honor to be a part of, whether we're in the society or not. We stand together, clans united against what they're trying to do to the church, because that's what God wants us to do. And it's because of that global resistance that now we're looking at persecution. Of course we are. There's always going to be persecution. And persecution is a good thing. Do you know why? Persecution is a good thing because when they start starving the lions, what does it mean? It means that the Christians have kept the faith. They haven't intimidated, they haven't bullied us into apostasy, right? Persecution always means the revolutionaries are running out of ideas. Well, let's just beat the crap out of them then. Let's just kill them. Let's throw them out. Because we sure as heck are not going to brainwash them. We will not make modernists and apostates out of the traditionalists. That's what they're saying. That's what they're tacitly admitting. And so they become desperate enough now to persecute us. Yesterday, it was Lefebvre, Archbishop Lefebvre, who they put on trial and excommunicated, threw him out of the church, right? Well, now today, 40 years later, what is it? It's mainstream Latin Mass Catholics who just want to go to the Latin Mass and keep the faith, right? And tomorrow, you know what it's going to be? Tomorrow it will be any Catholic who refuses to go along with the homo-synodal revolution in the church as figureheaded by guys like Jimmy Martin, right? And as I explained some months ago, it's anybody who's kept the faith. We would say to the Bishop of Charlotte, thank you, Your Excellency, thank you for clarifying exactly what this revolution is all about and has been all about since the very beginning. But anyway, here's poor Bishop Boomer down in Charlotte. He wants to get rid of the prayer to St. Michael, the Archangel. God knows why. Literally, God knows why. He wants to ban that 2,000-year-old venerable rite of the church. You know, the only Mass that Padre Pio ever knew. The only Mass that St. Joan of Arc ever knew. All the saints, virgins and martyrs, popes in history, all the way back to Peter. It's the Mass. And this guy, Bishop Boomer in Charlotte, North Carolina, he wants to ban it. Go ahead. Make profits out of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Please, make my day. Make my father into a prophet, because he knew you were coming. Make Dietrich von Hildebrand into a prophet, won't you? Michael Davies, oh my gosh, did he ever see you coming? He wrote books. He wrote trilogies of books about you, Bishop Boomer. He knew you were coming. We all did. Make prophets out of all the traditional Catholic pioneers who predicted, now with incredible pinpoint accuracy, that the day was coming when you, Bishop Boomer, all dressed up in your fancy muumuu and your new robes, would come prancing out into the sanctuary, the bulldozed sanctuary of the Catholic Church, as the abomination of desolation in the holy place, and claim that your new religion had no room whatsoever for the old religion. Because that's what you've done, your boomerness. So that was then. This is now, if you look at that article from the Remnant newspaper. If that's the way you want to play it, you want to throw everybody out of the church, okay. Well, the SSPX just went ahead and purchased 26 acres of land in Iron Station, North Carolina, to build a massive traditional Catholic enclave right on the front doorstep of Bishop Martin. They're going to preserve the faith one way or the other because that's what the order is of the law. That's what we are obliged to do before God until sanity is restored in this ridiculous synodal church of nonsense and apostasy. And see, that's the problem, friends. That's the problem the Vatican has with the Society of St. Pius X. It's not their little disobedience. It's not that. It's the organized opposition. It's the fact, okay, you want to play that game? We're not leaving the church. We're not electing our own pope, right? We're not setting up dioceses where we're going to put bishops of our own. No, none of the SSPX bishops have any territorial jurisdiction. That's intentional because that's the purview of the Pope. Only the Pope can do that. The bishops of the Society of St. Pius X that have been consecrated recently are for the purpose of making priests and confirming young people, making soldiers of Jesus Christ. That's it. And that's the problem. Because that's sustained for another 100 years already with these 4 new bishops. The society promises to continue to resist without leaving the church, without declaring themselves and sedevacantist, without electing their own pope. As I said, clearly they're saying to Pope Leo, lift these excommunications. They are unjust. We have not left the church. Right? Well, that creates quite a little pickle for the Vatican. They can't quite just run them out of the church quite so easily, can they? And this is the problem. The SSPX all over the world, keeping the old faith until sanity is restored, until the revolution collapses completely. Keeping the old faith, starting Latin Mass centers, where the church is dying and fading, the Novus Ordo mainstream church is dying. The society is starting Mass centers, places of faith, oases of traditional Catholic faith, belief, doctrine, liturgy, family life, right? In Europe, in Africa, in North and South America, in Mexico. Goodness, look at the map here. And it's the same in Australia, India, Japan. Okay, you see what we're looking at? When the Novus Ordo was dying, there's really nothing else in these countries. As churches close everywhere, they cancel the Latin Masses everywhere, thanks to Francis. Well, the future of the faith is in danger. It's in serious, critical condition. But then there's the SSPX. And if by their fruits you will know them, then we know that it is good. It is of God. So can you see that? Every one of those dots represents what? It represents a mission, a young priest, young families, the future. This is part of the missionary spirit of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, widely hailed as the most effective missionary of the 20th century, certainly in Africa, right? He knew what he was doing. He understood what it meant to be a missionary priest. And the thing the Vatican is desperately trying to excommunicate now is that missionary spirit throughout the whole world. And don't think for one second that this is going to stop, this idea of excommunicating the SSPX or pushing them aside or getting rid of them, that it stops with the SSPX, because it doesn't. No one is safe. Traditionis Custodes, whereby Pope Francis canceled the Latin Mass centers in the world, right, at the parish level, this was not leveled at the Society of St. Pius X. Remember? Francis went after the diocesan traditional Latin Masses. He was threatened by the diocesan traditional Latin Masses, which were taking over. So Traditionis Custodes was leveled at you, at me, at our kids, at our future. And you obviously won't be able to appease this particular rigid Pharisaical Vatican structure. No matter how hard you throw the Society of St. Pius X under the bus, what they want is for us to disappear. Anyone who's held on to the old faith, to cease. Either silence or cease breathing. They don't care which. And that's why the story of what's happening is going to keep going over and over and over again. That's why this should matter to you, whether you're SSPX or not. Because you're next. They're not listening to you. They're bullying you. They're terrorizing you. They're threatening you. And Cardinal Burke is right. Look at the red dots. Every one of these diocesan Latin Masses where the stated target of Traditionis Custodes was the traditional diocesan Latin Masses.
One of the problems in all of this is Traditionis Custodes, it's really a persecution of the traditional Latin Mass.
And while that's happening, the synodal folks are over there in Rome right now, absolutely demanding obedience from all of us, even after they themselves have given an example of sustained disobedience to God's law, to the laws of the church, to the Mother of God, even to natural law.
Last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why?
No, what I allowed was not to bless the union, but to bless each person. Why not?
And joining us now is ABC News papal contributor and consultant to the Vatican, Father James Martin. Good to see you, Father.
Good to be with you.
This is a milestone for the Catholic Church, but it still comes with limitations. Can you explain?
Yeah, sure. So we're able to bless same-sex couples, but it can't look like a marriage. It can't look like we're doing a wedding where we're in liturgical vestments and they're exchanging vows and things like that. So it's a little more informal. It's just, asking God to bless the couple.
Think about this, friends. Years before Fiducia Supplicans greenlit the blessing of homosexual couples that made Jimmy Martin so happy, the Vatican was busy refusing to obey Our Lady's command to reveal the third secret of Fatima. Do you remember? Eventually, the traditionalists were raising such a hubbub and resisting and trying to out the fact that they were disobeying the Mother of God that the Vatican finally trotted out sort of a doctored up version of the third secret, which even Mother Angelica, God bless her, publicly doubted back in 2001, the 2001 broadcast of Mother Angelica Live, which I saw live, which was very interesting. Mother sat there and she read the rather trumped up, edited, let's say, third secret of Fatima, and she said, I'm with those who don't believe this is the real secret, third secret of Fatima. God bless her. And do you know why they were so worried about the third secret of Fatima? I remember Malachi Martin told me this years ago because he said he had read it. I don't know if he did or not, but he said he had read it. Lots of people really, I think, understood what it was. The third secret of Fatima is essentially an indictment of the entire revolution of Vatican II.
You're being betrayed into thinking you're following God and you're following the devil. We can say from the testimony of people who've told us the secret concerns the Second Vatican Council. The secret concerns the Vatican itself. That is the testimony of Cardinal Chappi, who was the papal theologian to Pius XII, John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, and John Paul II, before he died in 1996. Here you have the papal theologian, there's only one at a time, telling us, in the third secret, among other things, it is foretold the great apostasy in the church begins at the top.
So that's what they were doing. That's the example of obedience that the Vatican and the popes had shown for a long time, even against the Mother of God herself. So now, because remember, Fatima is full of, if you do this, it's very conditional. Do the first Saturdays, pray the rosary, right? And maybe the worst isn't going to happen. Well, the worst is happening right now, friends. We see the war, the annihilation of nations, right? Genocide. But then we also see the demonic disorientation, even among the good people. Even the so-called conservatives in politics, completely losing the plot.
Trump is hostile to traditional Christianity. Trump is mad at Christians for opposing abortion and mentions it a lot in private. And he's very annoyed by it. And opposition to abortion annoys him a lot. He's mentioned to me like 30 times. I vehemently oppose abortion, just to be clear, because I think it's killing a child. Like, what are we doing? But I haven't argued with him about it. I just listened. Maybe I should have, but I didn't.
So when you see conservatives feeling like they have no option politically, gay marriage, fine. Contraception, fine. Divorce, fine. Sex change for kids, fine. Abortion pills mailed out to teenagers, well, it's better than the other party would do.
The biggest controversy centers on the abortion pill, mifepristone. Many pro-life activists want stronger federal action, including more FDA restrictions and a closer review of its safety and distribution. They also see the mailing of abortion pills as bypassing state restrictions. Trump, though, remains largely silent on the issue, leading Marjorie Dannenfelser, the president of the Susan B. Anthony list, to declare that, quote, Trump is the problem.
And where is the Catholic Church? How are they getting away with this? The conservatives, loading up with homosexuals, guys who are married to other guys, claiming to be conservatives. Where's the Catholic Church to sort of establish the conservative bar? Where's the church? Can we really blame the politicians for getting it all wrong when the Catholic Church is conspicuous by her absence?
The federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that.
When you see it at the political level and you realize the future doesn't look particularly good, right? And this is where a lot of us really lose patience with the Vatican and synodality and all of the nonsense buzzwords in the place of doctrine and dogma, right? Politically, the world is going to hell. Culturally, the children of darkness are annihilating truth, goodness, and beauty on a daily basis. Immorality, obviously, is rampant. Sexualizing kids, fine. A regime of transgenderism, draconian surveillance state now. Genocide, literally annihilating nations. And the Vatican is worried about the Society of St. Pius X, right? When parents, I'm a homeschool parent for 20-some years, been homeschooling my children, educating them at home. Why? Because I wouldn't let them set foot in the local Catholic schools anymore, right? So parents can't even send their kids to the Catholic schools that are still open, and most of them are closed. The nuns are all gone, thanks to Vatican, the spirit of Vatican II, right? And we can't even trust Catholic schools for fear of perverters, molesters, predators, killers of the souls of our little babies. The Catholic Church is literally no longer a safe haven for children.
Schools in Canada, Catholic schools in Canada, have pride rainbow flags flying or pride rainbow posters in elementary schools. How is this happening in Catholic institutions?
And we have not rushed into resisting the Vatican. We've been trying all along to work with them. They don't seem to be interested in listening to us. We've tried for decades. We've begged the Pope, including Leo in Rome, to hear our voices, to protect our kids. Holiness, I am not sure how much more scandal our children can endure. They have overheard the things of which St. Paul tells us we should not even speak. The sexual abuse of children, the homosexual abuse of seminarians and priests, the cover-ups, the blasphemies against God. And now, Traditionis Custodes. Your predecessor told the whole world that he wants to bless sinners living in sodomitical unions, that he wants unrepentant public adulterers to receive the sacraments. Tell me, Holy Father, how am I to explain this to my sons? What am I to say to my daughters about that? It's just so bizarre that the Holy Father still, his first concern is this sort of Woodstock in the Catholic Church from back in the 60s, the Second Vatican Council. There he is. He says, Pope Leo says, but they refuse to accept certain, he's talking about the Society of St. Pius X. They refuse to accept certain fundamental elements of the Church, starting with several points of the Second Vatican Council. If they make that choice, I'm sorry, but we must move forward. And that's exactly what they did, because of Vatican II. With all the chaos and apostasy and abuse of children and sexual abuse in the clergy, with everything going on in the world today, in the church today, the Pope in Rome is going to excommunicate. No, he already has excommunicated anyone who refuses to accept certain aspects of the Second Vatican Council, which he doesn't even bother to specify. Why? Because he can't. Because there are no doctrines in Vatican II that the Society of St. Pius X denies. You know that, right? It's a spirit. It's a spirit. It's the watershed moment. It's the revolution that he's talking about, right? There's nothing in Vatican II that I must accept in peril of my soul. If you can think of what it would be, some new doctrine in Vatican II that we must accept in peril of our soul, let me know what it is. It doesn't exist. It's not there. So the Society of St. Pius X doesn't accept something or other. In a council, think about this, in a council from way the heck a long time ago, Leo himself was a child when it closed. A council which Pope Leo's own predecessor said had been infiltrated by the media and it never even materialized. I've done it before, let's do it again.
And we know that this council of the media was accessible to all. It was dominant, more efficient. This council created many calamities, so many problems, so much misery in reality. Seminaries closed, convents closed, the liturgy was banalized. And the true council has struggled to materialize, to be realized. The virtual council was stronger than the real council.
Friends, so what are we talking about? What are we doing? The real council, according to the Pope, never materialized. Okay. Trivialized the Mass, closed the seminaries down, closed the religious houses down. What the world got was a disaster in the name of Vatican II, says Pope Benedict. So what are we even talking about here, Pope Leo?
Loro rifiutano di accettare certi elementi fondamentali della Chiesa, cominciando con diversi punti del Concilio Vaticano II.
Friends, obviously, we're right in the middle of a revolution. This whole period that you and I are living through right now is going to be writ large in the history books if history continues. This great reset of the Catholic Church is happening right before our eyes. The silent apostasy is what Pope John Paul II called it. The silent apostasy, right? And you know what? In the middle of all that, I'm sorry, the Society of St. Pius X is just not the problem. They're not schismatic. No more than St. Athanasius was schismatic during the Arian heresy, right? He writes to the traditionalists of his day, St. Athanasius did, way back, 4th century. He says, quote, while others have taken over the churches by violence, you, talking to the traditionalists, you are cast out. For they have the buildings, but you have kept the apostolic faith. They are, it is true, in the buildings, but outside the true faith. While you are outside the buildings indeed, but the faith is within you. Yeah, but the society is in schism, are they? Well, they were excommunicated, yeah. So was Joan of Arc. So was St. Joan of Arc, excommunicated, right? So was St. Athanasius, excommunicated, right? But history doesn't take those excommunications seriously, and neither do I. As Bishop Schneider put it so well, and so many times we quoted it down here, when St. Athanasius disobeyed Pope Liberius, the Pope excommunicated him, all right? Yep, he sure did. But that excommunication in the eyes of God was invalid. And yes, St. Athanasius also consecrated bishops without papal approval. But looking back now, with history as our guide, obviously our sensus catholicus tells us, how could Pope Liberius, who collaborated with the semi-Arians like the modernists of his time, how could he excommunicate the greatest defender of orthodoxy in the church, in the world at that time? It's patently absurd to worry about the excommunication of St. Athanasius, just like it's patently absurd to worry about the excommunication of the Society of St. Pius X bishops at this point, in the middle of this crisis in the church. The excommunication of St. Athanasius was unjust, and in the eyes of God, it was invalid. And there, ladies and gentlemen, is your precedent.